The other area that, in terms of emotional intelligence, that I think women are particularly good at, and research bears this out, is sensing others' feelings and perspectives and being able to empathize. Empathy is the ability to capture the feeling and meaning of what's going on for someone and to relay that back to them so that they feel like you understand. And it, again, is a core building block to effective communication, effective helping, and effective coaching. The place where I think women aren't as good, and WEI, WC, and more senior women in your organization, as well as, men who are aware and want to support, women aren't always as good at reading the organization. So the part of emotional intelligence that deals with the social awareness to read what's really going on in the organization, who the influencers are, what the networks are, what the dynamics are, I don't think women are as good, and that is something that's important to begin taking a look at as you move up in ranks in organizations. Women in leadership are good at collaborating. They often want to bring out the best in others and also enjoy bringing people together to get the job done, and are less concerned with the I did this versus the we did this together. And so those are areas, dynamics of emotional intelligence that really play to women's strengths in the area of relationship management. So when you look at these variables that I've been talking about, the components of emotional intelligence and areas where women tend to have strengths and opportunities to develop even more, it all kind of boils down to leadership and how these things have an impact on leadership. Do you recognize this picture?
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. This picture, Artemis identified it for those of you on the line that know Artemis. It's a young picture of Bill Murray when he started in Groundhog Day, and the theme of Groundhog Day is what? The same thing continues to happen until things change. So what is your natural leadership style? When you use it in interactions, is it working for you? And what kind of feedback are you getting? So whether you're male or female, based on the feedback you're getting, it's always important to hone your style and to build your leadership competence so that you become better and better at what you're doing. It's important, as we exercise our strengths, to realize that under a variety of different conditions, like the isolation I mentioned earlier, when women do reach the top, stress in your job, trying to balance too much, that confidence, which is good, can also become a sense of infallibility in men or in women. That quickness can become over hastiness, sharp wit can become abrasive. I'm coaching someone right now who saw himself as having a sharp wit, has been exhausting himself for multiple years in trying to meet the demands of his key leadership position, and a lot of people are seeing him as abrasive in his environment. Dedication can become workaholism, and this is an area where we as women particularly need to watch ourselves, taking care of perhaps aging parents or our younger families, coupled with the demands on the job and trying to dedicate everything to everyone else. We don't find work-life balance, and that workaholism is not a model for any leader, particularly women in leadership roles. And that's why some millennials will say, I don't want to be my mom. I don't want to be the workaholic she was. I want to enjoy my life. Control can become inflexibility. Perseverance can be seen as resistance to change or becomes resistant to change. And charm can also become manipulation. So in looking at our strengths, we need to be cautious that we create the right environmental variables to not have them turn into a weakness, which all of us are vulnerable to. The highest performing organizations are quick to identify opportunities and dismantle any barriers that impede effective execution of strategies and plans. Women are team players. There's mounting evidence in the communication literature that in general, women tend to be more consensus building than men. High-performing teams find a common goal and they put aside their individual egos to achieve results. Women seem to find it easier to focus less on what they want and more on what the collective wants. And that is a strength that we bring to the table that I want to feature. And with new structures of cross-functional teams, this really plays to our strengths in these areas. I wrote a piece that was appeared in LinkedIn. You might want to check it out, or if you'd like me to send you the link, you'll have my email at the end. You can email me. But I talk in this article about the strength women have being agile, and how I began thinking about this, and then, you know, after thinking about it, writing the blog, I was speaking with the founder of an entrepreneurial company about women in business, and he said to me, you know, my wife is the most incredible multitasker. She can integrate work, family, personal commitments with an ease and grace I'll never have. Her agility really knocks me out. And his comment is very true. And so one of the things that we do bring to the table as women is this ability to turn on a dime and be agile. It can be a competitive advantage for us as women, and certainly agility is a competitive advantage for your organization. I mentioned multitasking. I love this picture. I feel like this often. Actually, in some of the brain research, women have consistently been identified as having different wiring than men, which helps them to multitask more easily. With limited resources and the need to be able to juggle competing priorities, women are well suited to the multitasking required by the entrepreneurial environment. And even if you work for a big company, I work with a lot of entrepreneurial companies, but my firm also works with big companies. All the big companies are talking about the importance of being an entrepreneur, being entrepreneurial in your work environment. So this is a real advantage. Now, this is a little bit at odds with some of the research on mindfulness and the importance of focusing on one task at a time. However, when women need to kick into multitasking, we are geared and our brain is wired to be better at it. The most recent book I wrote, CEO Road Rules, talks about the importance of right focus, right people, and right execution. I interviewed over 50 CEOs, and we synthesized what we learned in how to build a high-performing organization and how to create more significance in our own lives, in our clients' lives, both on a business and personal level. In one of the interviews, and I wanted to share this with you, I interviewed a woman named Jan Alpert. Jan went from being secretary of an organization to sitting on the board of a publicly traded company. And one of the things that Jan said helped her be successful was that she always developed her successor. When she was given an opportunity, she went right into developing who a successor might be so she could be ready to move into the next role. The other thing that Jan did that I think is very important is she built her own internal brand. Now, she didn't logically say, I want to build my brand and this is what my brand's going to be. But one of the things she loved was the challenge. So Jan volunteered for opportunities nobody else wanted. Somebody needed to move to Nebraska to turn around a division of the company that wasn't performing well. Jan volunteered. So she became known for a problem solver who also built leadership talent. And Jan often coached other women on how to move up the corporate ladder in her organization. So she was a real model for not only developing her own skill set, but developing the brand of others. So one of the strategies I think is really important for women in leadership to focus on, and many times we think we're so busy in our current role, how can we even take the time, because it does take more time to develop someone else. You know that from coaching others. But developing your successor is really key. In Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg talks about how far more women won't go to the next level because they don't feel they have all the right skill set yet. So they're still trying to get better in their current job, whereas she noticed that the men she interviewed for promotions probably knew half the new job, maybe even less, and they were very willing to move to the next job, and also they were better at developing their successor in their current job. I don't know if it's because, and now it's not as much of an issue because a lot of young women grew up playing sports, but men grew up playing sports. It's very common to have somebody to go in and take your place. So whether a player got injured or tired or whatever, so building that person to take your place seems to be a more natural thing for many men in organizations than it has been for women. Building your brand, and that's the term I'm using, and Jan Alpert is an example of that. She built her brand for being a problem solver and also building her network of successors, building leaders, and women in leadership. Focusing on the competencies that build gender-balanced organizations, and I've mentioned those in the presentation, those competencies of emotional intelligence and transformational leadership, which is where organizations are moving and where women, I believe, have a real opportunity. And finding support amongst female peers. Some of you maybe have some questions at this point, and I'm going to make some time at the end of this presentation to address those questions. But before I do that, I do want to speak for a moment about the importance of finding support among female peers. WEI-WC is one place that you can do it, certainly. Another place, a place that I have found really effective is in peer forums. Artemis mentioned in the introduction that I have worked with CEO and other leadership forums. My company for the past 15 years has done that kind of work with great success on helping the participating leaders grow and their organizations grow. Last year, we developed a unique thing called the True North Women's Forum. And the Women's Forum's purpose is to bring together women in senior leadership roles, doesn't have to be the head of the organization, to focus not only on business and leadership issues, but on women in leadership issues, and also issues in terms of aligning with what's purposeful for you. The term True North was coined by a guy out of Harvard, Bill George, and when Bill was talking about True North, he was talking about the alignment of an individual with what's purposeful for them in their work, and the alignment of an organization in terms of the organization aligning with its purpose or mission. And so I thought the True North Women's Forum was a great title because the women participating focus on what's purposeful for them, and also to stay aligned with that and to realize when they're out of balance. Very, very important for women. And these are things that I recommend that you consider doing in your work environments in terms of finding a peer group where you can let your hair down. All the women sign confidentiality agreements. So it's a place where people are safe and they can be with like-minded peers. I think one of the difference between this and just getting together with women you know, the women in our True North Women's Forums report, one woman commented saying, you know, it's like being with your girlfriends, but a lot of my girlfriends don't really understand what I do. It's great to be with women friends who also understand what it's like to feel the pressure of operating at a key level in an organization. So one of the tools that we use in the peer forum that may be of interest to you and whatever you might do with this is a decision map. And so we check in. The Women's Forum meets for a half day a month. If people are out of town, there are forums that can develop for a full day a quarter, where people come and bring a business issue or opportunity. It might have an issue of women in leadership laced in it, because that offers a challenge sometimes. And the women bringing the issue to the group will take 10-15 minutes to describe their issue, summarizing what it is, or might be an opportunity, and enlisting the group's help. They provide some information so that the group can drill down. So what are some of the key points that the group needs to know to be of assistance to the woman bringing the issue? What are some of the options that that woman has already thought about or evaluated? And are they taking any action, or is there some action that they want to take? And once they describe the issue, they have to zip it and not go any further, and the rest of the women ask them questions. A Socratic approach that helps you learn what you know and don't know about your issue or opportunity. And then after the questioning phase, each woman in the round table offers their suggestions, advice, and shares their experience before we discuss it. So the richness of the diversity of the viewpoints comes out. And then we discuss the issue in more depth, and I always ask the women bringing the issue to the group, what are the 2 or 3 things that you heard that you're going to act on? I make note of it, and the women remember. So this is something that you can take away as a strategy, perhaps, either through WEIWC or some other vehicle. We've helped organizations install this process in their companies. It's a little less effective, though, because sometimes confidentiality becomes an issue. I encourage you to also invest in some developmental coaching. Women are often reluctant to do this. I think the stigma of having a coach has kind of gone away at one point. Having been a coach for about 20 years now, organizations would often ask for a coach to come in if there were problems. But now more and more organizations are bringing in coaches because they want to develop their talent. So being able to assess where you are versus where you'd like to be, set some key goals, and begin to develop a plan of action and stay accountable to that plan by tracking the results is a very, very powerful way to develop as a woman in leadership roles. So in closing, I wanted to say that we focused on the pitfalls and some of the obstacles. Wanted to feature the strengths and also the strategies that can help you develop as a leader, whether you're currently running a company or somewhere else in a leadership position in your company. There's so many opportunities. I do want to say that the most important thing here is really taking action. So before we get into questions, I want to leave you with this thought. So have the courage to just take one thing and act upon it. What questions might you have?
Mary, Artemis, I had one question. I was just referencing back to your book. And when you interviewed 50 CEOs, and I'm not sure when you wrote the book, but when you interviewed the 50 CEOs, what percent of those CEOs were women?
2 of the CEOs were women.
Okay.
And unfortunately, excuse me, we're trying to find your questions here. We're trying now to identify your question. So,
so 2 out of the 50?
2 out of the 50 were women, yes.
Okay, so a relatively small percentage. And when did you write that?
I wrote that book like 2006.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we're going to unmute you and see if there are some questions that you might have. Ladies? Or comments? Just state your name. Any questions? Right. Oh, I see a question here. The question is, once we develop our self-awareness, what should we be doing next? And, what I want to emphasize is that this process is really something that needs to be happening not in a unilateral way, but not in a straight line. But as you work on that, working on some of the other leadership competencies that I've been outlining is really important. Joining a network. So you want to put together a plan that really addresses kind of a multidimensional approach. And it is not so ambitious that it's overwhelming. I don't know about you, but when you go to a grocery store and there are like 5 or 6 kinds of mustard you can buy, you're more likely to buy a jar of mustard. But when you go to a grocery store, a gourmet store that might have 40 different kinds, you usually walk out without the mustard. So don't build such a big plan that you overwhelm yourself.
Mary, I had once read, and maybe you can comment on this, on emotional intelligence and self-awareness, that once you identify your maybe some of your emotional triggers, that in your brain, the messaging, the emotional triggers actually go through, or the message comes in your brain and hits your emotional triggers first, and then goes into logical thought process. And so one of the things that I recall in reading that was or maybe I just took it away, was if it hit an emotional trigger and you could identify that trigger, therefore you could apply logic to it in order to deal with it quicker. Is it any truth to that, or does that even sound logical?
Yes, okay. Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's a really important key, and a lot in our coaching is people have these mental models of, if somebody says something, then I might say something to myself that isn't accurate, like someone might not look at me in a meeting and I might be saying to myself, they're mad at me. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with that, right? Mm-hmm. But the mental model is that, maybe it goes way back to when you were a child, and when someone in your family, like your dad or your mom, were mad at you, they didn't look at you. And so you never question it. So if you become more self-aware, yep, in touch with that, then you get in touch with the fact that you're feeling that certain way, and then you go back and say, wait a minute, is this really true? And make that little shift in your brain so that you're not judging that person who's not looking at you by that old standard. Yeah. And then that's a big element of self-awareness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
One of the questions here, what steps would you recommend a woman take when she receives feedback that she is too aggressive in her role? That's an excellent question, and I think that the whole thing with the label of aggression is that it doesn't give us anything to work with. So the first step would be to look for ways to be able to get specific examples of what they saw you doing or saying that help them come to the conclusion that you are, or the woman in this situation, is in fact aggressive. So what were those behaviors that, examples that happened there that would indicate that you were? Was there a situation that maybe when the woman got really excited in a conversation with someone that they cut that person off, or was the woman saying something differently? Now, there is also a situation where sometimes we get labeled aggressive for being assertive. The distinction between being aggressive and being assertive is that when we are assertive, we are honoring the other person's feelings and we're owning our own. So my saying, I feel frustrated because you committed to doing this and this is the third time that we're canceling this meeting, is different than saying to someone, you're really not committed to this. This is the third time you canceled. So using I statements versus you statements, for example, can change that. However, you need more data because the term aggressive is very big and means different things to different people, and you can't really put your arms around it until you really get examples. And that's one of the reasons I like 360s. They're anonymous, and they're better done by an outside party. A 360 that you have done that's done within an organization, people are more reluctant to tell the truth. And so, I always recommend that when you're comfortable having an outside party do that, where you can never know who said what, affords a level of confidentiality that's important.